is actually autographed from all the original members.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
the only thing that's wrong with that
talk
cover is
about
that
this
lettering.
image too, because I was trying I went to describe this to someone. I couldn't really describe it.
Well, the story behind that is when I'm Catholic. So when I did my confirmation, my aunt gave me 2 prints. They were English illustrator. I don't know who it was, but there were these glossy prints. And one was a good man and the other one was a bad man, both at the split second of their death.
Oh.
Okay. And the good man, all his images were angelic and the sleeping lions and all that stuff. And they were beautiful. They were like not Currier and Ives, but they were that kind of thing. They were really not, they were more painted than line illustration like Currier and Ives. And I kept them. I mean, they were, and the evil man, all his relatives were turning into demons and all that stuff. And so when I sat with, we got a call from the manager and said, hey, you know, with Black Sabbath, they really love your work. They want to talk to you about doing an album cover for them. So I went out, I made a meeting with them, and they had rented a house in Bel Air. They had rented this big mansion. And in the mansion, there was a ballroom, like you see in the movies, a freaking ballroom. And so I went there to the mansion to meet them. And this guy that looked like he was right out of Rocky Horror Show answers the door and says, yeah, they're expecting you. And he takes me down this long hall, opens up the door, and it's this ballroom. And they're in there rehearsing. The whole band, Ozzy and all Geezer, all of them are in there. And they're rehearsing with the light show and the whole thing. And I got to get a personal concert. I was the only one in there.
Wow.
I sat there through this whole rehearsal. And then I met with Ozzy and I met with Geezer and we were talking and they were telling me one of the things that we did really well was working with the bands and trying to be, like I said, that emotional link, create that link between the music and what the messaging of the music is and the end user. Okay. And that was a hard thing to do. And that's why I can show you, I've done 247 album covers. I could show you each one of them. None of them look the same because each band was different. Even if the genre of music was the same, each band was different. And we made it specifically for that. It's like having, you can buy a suit off a rack or you can have one custom made. We custom made it. And I got a chance to sit with them and hear what they had to say about Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And all the time they're talking to me, I'm thinking about these 2 prints that I have. Wow. And not that they said the good man and evil man, none of that. They were just talking about the songs and what they were, how they were feeling when they were doing them. And so I went back and I had those 2 prints. And I was working with Drew Struzan, who later became the most collected illustrator in the world. All the Rocky, all the Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He did all those movie posters. Most collected illustrator in the world. And so I showed him, Drew was a staff illustrator there, and I wanted him to do the cover. And I showed him these 2 pieces. And he created those sketches. I don't know whether you saw the sketches.
I saw the sketches.
The print that I have. Did you see the sketches?
I did.
Yeah. So he did that, and I created the lettering, that real kind of beautiful lettering. And they loved it. And we also in the States, it was only a front and a back.
Right.
In Europe, it was a gatefold. Yeah. And on the inside gatefold, there's a picture of them all kind of posing in these kind of, angelic poses, and we superimposed them behind this big 4-poster bed. It was shot in England, and I have all these pictures of them standing around in their underwear, smoking cigarettes and joking around, and they're all in their underwear because they're naked from the waist up. So they just all got in their underwear. So I have all these outtakes. There's probably 50 of them where they're clowning around and doing all this shit like outtakes. So anyway, we turned in everything, and then we're waiting for the album to come out. And when it came out, it had that lettering on it that just really didn't belong there at all. And so I was kind of pissed off about that. And it just didn't work. And if you look, and I showed this to Tony last week, if you look at that cover, bring that cover back up. Okay, now you see behind the skull and behind the bed, there's those 2 lines that are curved.
Right.
See them? There,
Yes.
yeah. Those go up to the logo that I did. And they didn't understand that. So they left those in there and put a different lettering on it. So that lettering was not, that was a surprise to me because I thought that logo that I did for them was the quintessential heavy metal logo.
It's so weird that they didn't, that the piece that you handed in wasn't the exact like thing that was shot and that it could even happen. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they didn't tell us that they were doing it. And I later found out that if I wanted to be a real dick about it, I could have sued them for changing it without my permission. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I have those two pieces of artwork in my collection. They're absolutely beautiful. That cover doesn't do them justice. Those pieces.
It's amazing. It's a masterpiece, really.
Yeah, well, it's 30 by 40.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
when we were at the Smithsonian in Memphis, and I was like a fly on the wall. I did a lot of hanging out there while people were coming through looking at, I had 125 pieces all framed and matted that we rotated in the Smithsonian. And what we did was in the middle of the room, we put a big anvil shipping case, and on the case, we put the actual album covers. So you could walk over and pick up a cover and then walk over, welcome to my nightmare. You pick it up, it's a 12 3/8 by 12 3/8 square. You walk over to the oil painting that's 30 by 40, and it's like, oh my God, and same with Black Sabbath. Those pieces are huge.
Right.
And Drew
shoot it and then reduce it to.
Yeah, because it would sharpen it up. It would make it better. You never did it actual size or smaller. You always did it bigger. That's why a lot of this artwork in my collection, I mean, people are amazed that it's like it works in reverse. If you think of the Mona Lisa, and you go to the what do you call it there? And there it is. And it's the Louvre, and it's like this little painting.
Yeah.
And people can't believe it, and then so it kind of works in reverse with these.
Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is huge. And
it's 30 by 40, each the front and the back cover. So Drew did those beautiful, and those are done in color pencil. They're color pencil, and the backgrounds are acrylic.
Wow.
But all the rendering of the figures and all that stuff, because when he first came to us, that was one of the things that he was really good at, oil painting and color pencils. He didn't do any airbrushing. He actually learned airbrushing at Pacific Eye by Carl Ramsey, who was an amazing airbrush illustrator, another staff illustrator. And Drew worked with him on how to draw figures, and he taught Drew how to use an airbrush, which he then went later on into the movie poster business and was all airbrush.
He took over. So how long did it take him to do those covers?
He did the front cover painting for Black Sabbath. It took him about 3 days.
Wow.
And then the back cover probably another 2-3 days.
He did quick for the detail work.
The Welcome to My Nightmare cover. Yeah. That's a huge painting. And he did this. We went and shot a bunch of scrap of Alice up at his Mulholland. He had bought Groucho Marx's house up on Mulholland. So we went there and met with him and Shep, and we took some scrap photography for Drew to draw from. And we came back to the studio, and for the next day, Drew stretched a canvas, and he did this beautiful graphite pencil drawing. And it was Drew has a way of breathing life and 3-dimension into a flat 2-dimensional image.
Yeah,
and he did
like in the Alice Cooper's Greatest Hits. It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, and like in the Harrison Ford Raiders of the Lost Ark, you look at that drawing and it looks better than he looks.
Yeah,
and it looks real. So Drew had the ability to do that, and so he did this beautiful pencil drawing. I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. And I remember that night I was there with Tony, and we were getting high in the art department and looking at that drawing, and it was on an easel, and they're just like, man, this thing is beautiful. So the next day, I had to make a couple stops at a client and pick up some projects. And so when I got to the studio, he had taken a brown, like a ochre, not ochre, it was more of like an earth brown paint, oil, and painted over the entire pencil drawing. So now it's like this baby diarrhea colored canvas with, you could see the pencil drawing through it because it was semi-transparent. And I freaked out. I was like, what did you do? What are you doing? And he said, don't worry. He said, that's how I do it. I paint that in as a middle tone, and then I go back in and paint the darks and lights and work it. And
Wow.
it was like this. He's there at the canvas. This is not an exaggeration. He had his palette, all oils. Took it, started in the upper left-hand corner, painted it, and when he was down at the bottom right-hand corner, it was done, and he signed it. And he did that painting 2 days.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What an exceptional person he is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just, I never, you know, even when I looked at his book the first time and he came to an interview, and I had the illustrator, Joe Garnett, who actually did the cover for Simon's, that first album with the pulp cover. Joe did that. He was a staff illustrator.
Black
Joe,
Whip Thrill Band. The Black Whip Thrill.
The Black Whip Thrill Band, right. And Joe had a nervous breakdown.
Oh.
And I needed, he was the only illustrator. It was me and him and a production artist. So
there was one other cover I want to show you.
Sure, sure.
And this is just like an important, very important
Aerosmith.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little, so give us some backstory.
Okay, yeah. Lieber Krebs was their management, and they were huge fans of Pacific Ioneer. And they called us up and said, you know, Aerosmith's doing a new album, and it's called Teddy Bear's Funeral. Okay. So I go to the Hyatt Regency, or the Continental Hyatt on Sunset, and Joe Perry's there and Steven Tyler, and we're all partying with the magic dust. And and they're telling me about this album, right? And we're just, and Steve, I got to tell you, Steve had this long little fingernail, and he had product that was cured in eucalyptus, and it was like snorting a little bit of heaven every time you did it. And it was like your whole face, you couldn't feel your face, even with your hand, you couldn't feel it. So so I'm in there, and him and I and Joe are partying, and Joe's throwing TVs out of the window, you know, and then they call down to room service, have another one brought up, and they just add it to the tab and throw it out the window into the parking lot, you know, and drinking. And so they're telling me about Teddy Bear's Revenge, Teddy Bear's Funeral, this new album that they're doing. And it's really about maturing. You know, you come, for them, it was an album that saw a whole different evolution of them and moving forward. And when you're a child and you play with children's toys, when you become an adult, you put those toys away, and you play with adult toys like money and guns and shit like that. So that was kind of the feeling of the album. So I went away, spent the whole day there with him, man. I mean, let's put it this way. When I left there, I lived down on Wilshire, which is about 2 miles down from where their hotel was. I got lost. That's how messed up I was. I got lost.
Wow.
I got lost going home.
Wow.
So I knew I was in a great place, and those guys were animals. I mean, but so anyway, a couple days later, they're working on the album at Sunset Sound, or one of those, like Wally Hyder, wherever it was. And so I go back a couple of days later, and I have all these ideas for, you know, Teddy Bear's Funeral. And I had this one sketch that I did that I really loved. It was them like at a graveyard with the tombstone for Teddy, and it's you know, and then had the flowers on the ground, and they're all there with umbrellas, and it's raining. It could have almost been a Beatles cover, you know. And so as I start to make the presentation, Steven said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, we changed the name of the album to Toys in the Attic." And it's like, it's the same kind of feeling, like you put away your toys and you become a man. So I'm showing them these sketches that have to do with Teddy Bear's Funeral. And, but they liked a couple of things that a couple of the other ideas that I had as well. And so Ingrid Hinke, who was a fashion illustrator and a model, and actually a children's book illustrator, she was there living with Bonnie and I, best friends. And she had left her long live-in guy in Virgin Islands. He retired. He was running Warner Brothers Music, and she was living with him. And he retired and took her to the Virgin Islands, and she was just too young to retire. And so she ended up coming back and living with us for a couple of years. And she was an artist, beautiful fashion illustrator. and children's book, and she worked downstairs in the art department with us. And so when I came back and said, well, you know, the name of the album's changed, it's now going to be Toys in the Attic, you know, and I said, Ingrid, you know, you'd be perfect. You know, you do children's books, you do fashion, do me a sketch. And so she did. And she went back with me to meet with them, and we're all starting to come. And then Steven's hitting on her because she's a real dish. I mean, she was beautiful. And it was really funny, but she ended up doing that cover. And yeah, it was. And then we did Rocks after that. That was the next one we did.
Which is an appropriate album, given the story given the story you're just telling.
Most bands, we would do one or two things and then they'd move on and we'd move on. Burton Cummings, I did 6 albums for him, I think, but Black Oak, we did 6 or 7. Alice was the one that kept coming back, you know, and it's really funny because when you're working on those kind of things, even though Alice was like one of the biggest things in rock and roll, never really looked at him that way. It was just, this is a cool guy who's really good at what he does. And, you know, I'm just honored to be able to be part of what they're doing. I mean, we really helped shape that whole image. In fact, for our book, when Ivor interviewed Shep Gordon, he interviewed Alice Cooper, and he interviewed Bob Ezrin, the producer. And all 3 of them basically said, if there was no Ernie Shuffler, there would be no Alice Cooper, which I thought was, I mean, everything from the makeup, from the lashing to the simple lines, we did all of that. We worked on his entire image and the packaging and making it unlike Muscle of Love. I mean, a great, that's a whole nother story that was crazy. Yeah. But, you know, we went on, you know, it's funny when I look back on it, that I was never afraid. You know, people said, well, were you ever afraid? I was never afraid. It was, for me, it started out with hatred for the company that I left to start Pacific Ioneer. And because I got cheated out of stuff that I did. And there's nothing worse than having somebody take credit for something you did, you know, and so there was a lot of hatred there. And I was able to re-engineer that hatred into fuel for creativity. It's kind of crazy, but you know, it's like,
well, what I'd like to say about Pacific Ioneer and about you is that you're a guy that's able to take their concept and their idea and make it so into a reality that relates to the artist. Now, for instance, Hypnosis was another graphic company, but they were a company that made really whacked out stuff that didn't have anything to do with the band at all. And it was like, what does this have to do with it? But they were iconic, but the stuff you did is personality driven. You get with these people, you get what they're about, and you produce it like how Bob Ezrin produces their sound, you produce their visual.
Yeah, well, so we worked a lot with Bob and Hypnosis. You know, when they came to America, they interviewed us. They spent 3 days with us at Pacific Ioneer. Storm Thurgeson and one of the other guys. I don't remember the other guy, but I remember Storm. And they interviewed us, and we're in that first book, that first album cover book that was done. We've got like, I don't know, 13 pages or some shit in there with it. They were big fans of our work, and their work was mainly photographic. And our work was mainly illustrative. And you know, back to, and just circle back to what we're saying, and I had mentioned to Steve in the beginning that, you know, we're doing a book. I want to do a book, but I don't want it to be an album cover book. There are probably 24 or more album cover books out there. And the thing that makes our book different is that we were very unusual in the sense that we were doing corporate work as well as music. And that was real rare. If you look at those album cover books that are out there, you probably won't see any, or if at all, any corporate work that they did. What we did was we'd be working on, we'd put out between 4 and 6 album covers a month and about 4 or 5 corporate pieces a month.
Wow, so equal amount almost.
Yeah, right. And so there was this balance because I never wanted to get pigeonholed. I never wanted to just do album covers. I didn't want people to go, oh, Pacific Ioneer, the album cover company. No, we do work for Nestle. We do work for Coca-Cola. We do work for Rockwell International. I mean, one day we'd be working on on a trade show, a Navy League trade show, where you're escorted through the show by armed guards, where you go to buy missiles and rockets and shit like that. The Navy League show, and we worked on Rockwell. We did a booth for them 2 years in a row for this show. They had a 3-ring laser gyro guidance system for nuclear submarines and battleships, and we did trade show booths for them, and so we're working on that, and then we're also working on an Alice Cooper album, and we're working on 13 buses we did for the LA RTD, where they were buses that were designed to go from 13 locations directly to the beach. And they look like big submarines with fish and stuff painted on the sides and turrets and flags. And we took out the back 10 rows of seats, and you could take your dogs and your surfboards and your bikes. And it was to cut down traffic during the summer months. It was called the Street Fleet. And we did all this stuff. They used it for 3 rows. If you go to the internet and type in streetfleet.com, LARTD, streetfleet.com, you'll see them. They look like big submarines. We painted them gray, and we painted all these fish and seaweed on the sides. Clarion Car Stereo was our agent, our client. They came from overseas, and we got them, and we did all their stuff, and we equipped the buses with incredible sound systems, and just did this whole thing for young kids. And you joined in school, and you got your summer pass, and you could take it. It would take you from where you were directly to the beach and back.
That is cool.
So, and then we'd be doing other stuff, Sizzler Steakhouse, Flying Tiger Air Freight. It goes on and on and on.
Unbelievable.
I never wanted to get pigeonholed. I never wanted to do just one thing, because people are quick to put you in a category, and then
now you're coming into what's the thing that's now and in the future, is that marijuana is becoming legalized.
Yeah.
And you're doing packaging with that, and you're involved in this in a big way. Talk about that a little.
Yeah, it's funny because I was always a user recreationally since I was 20. I'm going to be 76, and I'm still doing it.
Wow.
About 11 years ago, when I saw that it was getting more and more mainstream, even though it was illegal, even medical was illegal, and I wanted to get in the industry. I felt that there was something there. And so what I did was I started going around to these collectives. I actually went and got a medical card. This was about 12 years ago. And I would go and actually medical was just becoming okay. So the collectives were only medical, not recreational. And you had to have a medical card and all that stuff. So I actually did it because I had couple bad car accidents when I was younger, and I had hips that hurt me all the time. So my friend of mine said, hey, you really, and I was getting all my pot I would go all the way to Boonville, California, which is a 9-hour drive from LA, to get my pot from a guy that I knew since he was a kid. He was a grower up there in Humboldt County. And I would drive back, and that's what I would do. And it was good pot, but I still had the pain. And I had a friend say, hey, there's this strain called Granddaddy Perp, and it's really good for pain. You really should get it. And my dealer didn't have it, so I went and got a medical card, and I went to collectives, and every collective had it. It was purple-looking pot, and I would buy it. And I spent about a year and about $3,000 trying to find it, but it was never any better than what I was already getting. So one day I'm at home, and I get this phone call, and by this time I'm pretty fed up with I'm never going to be able to get. The only good thing about having the medical card is I can go to a place where there's a variety of pot, because usually your dealer had 1, maybe 2 different kinds if he was connected. Usually it was one kind. So I liked it for that, but I never really found the right thing. So one day I get a phone call from a guy in Northern California who wants a logo done for a product. And he wouldn't tell me what the product was. And he said, I've looked at your work. I've seen you on the internet, and I know who you are. I've seen your album covers, and I want to know if you'd be interested in designing a logo for me for my product. And I said, no, I'm not interested.
Really?
And he said, well, I thought that's what you do. And I said, well, it is, but let me ask you a question. I said, do you have children? And he said, yeah, I have 2 sons, twins, and a daughter. I said, well, let me ask you a question. How would you like it if I came and took one of your kids and I raised it the way I wanted to raise it. I could do whatever I wanted to it, and you didn't have a word to say about it. How would you feel about that? And he was like, he couldn't believe that I was asking. He said, well, I wouldn't like that at all. And I said, right. I said, I don't have any children. What I create, those are my children. And the last thing I want to do is give you one of my kids and have you raise it without any say so on my part. You take it to somebody else and they change it. So I'm not interested in doing that. Okay.
Oh, I see.
Let's cut to the chase, save frustration on my part. I'm not interested in that. But, and the guy was like, he didn't know what to say. He thought probably thought I was crazy. So he said, I said, but if you want to build a brand, that's what I do. I do that best. I can help you build a brand. So he agreed to come and see me, wouldn't tell me what the product was. Now, remember, I've been looking for Granddaddy Perp for over a year. And so he comes, he's with this Vietnamese kid, and he's in a wheelchair. The guy named Ken Estes, and he was there in the beginning in Northern California, Oakland. And he actually brought the Granddaddy Perp strain from way up north, from American Indians that had been growing it. And they gave him a plant of it because he had helped them save some land. And he was a big drug dealer at that time. He had a lot of cash. So he lent this Indian tribe. They were getting screwed by the taxes that they needed on their property. It was going to get taken away. So he helped them. So they gave him this plant. And so he came, and we carried him up the stairs in the wheelchair, and we were sitting there talking, and he said, well, what we have is a marijuana product. And I'm like, really? Really? Yeah, it just so happens that I'm a marijuana user. And so he said, yeah, it's Granddaddy Perp. And I said, oh, I got Granddaddy Perp. So I went over to my little stash place, and I bring out my jar of Granddaddy Perp, and I put it out there, and he busts it open, and he looks at the Asian kid, and he says, show him. So they bring out this big mason jar, and it's purple. It's purple. They undo the lid, and the whole room just filled with this amazing smell. And I've been with them ever since. It's been 11 years, and I did all the Granddaddy Perp stuff, and then the guy in the wheelchair was just too crazy for us. So the grower and I left the company, and we started our own company called King Clone. And we were at one point selling about 3,000 clones a week, and now we're back. I mean, we'd open it and it'd get shut down. We'd open it and it'd get ripped off. And it was, it was still all illegal because getting permits, very hard to do and very expensive. So eventually, to make a long story short, we were up and down, but we built a reputation. People knew Granddaddy Perp. They knew King Clone because we had the best clones, better than Dark Art. In fact, Harborside wanted us to do a deal with them where we would go into their facility in Oakland there and set up a clonery and do all that stuff. But they were real scumbags, so we didn't do it. And they ended up ripping off a company called Dark Art that went and did it. And they got screwed. But there's a lot of that in this industry. But when we started King Clone about 8 years ago, we really built a reputation, and now we're back. Now we're back, and we're legal, and things are really moving right along. And then my partner in that is partners with a guy in the second largest collective and grow in San Jose. It's called CA Collective. They're growing around 1,000 pounds every 10 days, and it's gone in about 3 days. And it's amazing. And I was just there. I went there on Wednesday. I was there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, came back Saturday for a 3-day photo shoot where we went into all these grow rooms and I was like a pig in shit, man. It was like awesome. And just all this pot everywhere, more, and just big buds and all this incredible pot. And we spent 3 days with one of the top food photographers in the country, a guy named Myron Beck, who I had probably did 100 photo shoots with him through Nestle, and we did all the Wolfgang Puck pizza boxes, and again, all these different industries. And Myron and I have been friends for a long time, and we needed photography that was going to blow people away. And so we spent 3 days shooting the most amazing marijuana photography ever. And we're going to be putting it out there on CA and King Clone. And
that's great.
another company called Asha out of Boston. It's a medical marijuana company. And so I'm doing all that packaging. And, you know, it's funny, Tony, because I never thought, and Steve, I never thought that I would get to a place where I would turn down work. You know, it was always take work, even if it's chicken shit, you can make chicken salad out of it. And that's the job. And now I'm at a point where there's a certain amount of time that's my time, and that's not for sale. That never existed before. It was always work 7 days a week. I would work on an average of 6 or 7 projects at a time. And I just kind of realized turning 75, it's really scary, man. I mean, 75, I mean, I remember a time when I was in college, I never thought I'd live past 30, you know? And
Right. But isn't it exciting now that you can use all your knowledge of packaging and selling and all this and use it to something that you've always loved, and now it's becoming legal. It's like a new era.
We're right there in the front of it all, man. I mean, it's timing, being in the right spot at the right time with the right stuff. And these guys came to me because of the rock and roll stuff, you know. And it's really funny because corporate America, when I got into Nestle, I remember I was the guy that I did that took me to Avery, and I did all the Chicago Marathon stuff for it. Loved the work that I did, and he set up a meeting with 5 of the other. So it was himself. There's 6 different divisions. He and 5 other heads of those products and divisions had a meeting with me, and he was introducing me to them and encouraging them to use me for what they were doing. And I was sitting in this meeting, and these people are straight, man. And he's telling them about the Chicago Marathon and what a success that was and everything we did. And this one woman said to me, "Oh, you know, what else have you done that I might know?" And so without even thinking, I said, "Well, I did the Rolling Stones song." And she said, "The Rolling Stones, you mean that demonic group that worships the devil and stuff?" And I'm like, no, they're not really like that. And then I said, "But I did work for Alice Cooper," without even thinking, oh, the guy that eats babies on stage and stuff. And so I never, after that meeting, and we quickly changed the subject and stuff and came in with some, you know, the Carpenters and other bands that were more easy listening.
Tony Orlando and Don.
Yeah, exactly. And so I never really talked much about it to people at Nestle, except when we became good friends and they would know. I mean, everybody really loved it, but they were like closet rock and rollers.
Well, the whole industry was against rock and roll.
Oh yeah.
In fact, I know the Alice Cooper guys are friends of mine, and I know for a fact that Neil Smith on the $1 Billion Babies tour, that Alice was drinking so much Budweiser, they were the poster boys for Budweiser, and Neil wanted to make his drum kit, which had a lot of drums, more than Keith Moon.
Right.
Each drum was going to be a Budweiser can, and Budweiser told them they didn't want him to do that they would sue him. They didn't want anything to do with rock and roll bands. Budweiser.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we came out with a Whiplash makeup because of his eye makeup. We had a product called Whiplash, and we tried to get all these cosmetic companies. Nobody wouldn't even return the calls. You know, our music wasn't selling anything then.
Right.
And only now does it sell stuff.
Right.
You know, but back then they were afraid of it, you know, because.
But then the Rolling Stones and Budweiser were like synonymous.
Sure. Well, and the Rolling Stones, I mean, there's no doubt that they are the greatest rock and roll band in the world. You know, I mean, they are prolific. Their music is still great. They sell out stadiums. You know, I mean, they are the quintessential rock band, and when they tour, they own all the equipment that schleps the tour. They own all this. They own everything. They own the trucks. They own everything. They're very smart guys, and they're great musicians. And I again, like I said, I don't care whether you think Ruby Mazer did it or John Pichet or, you know, the Man in the Moon. I'm just glad that I was able to be part of it. And the internet, part of the reason why I even got on the internet was to straighten out the story, because there were all these different stories. And I started 7 years ago, just telling how it happened and what went down and how all that came about. And over the years,
records didn't used to even have that much information. sometimes the record wouldn't even have a picture of the band or the names of the members or anything on it.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Well, because a lot of, like the 5-man electrical band, there were only 4 guys.
Well, sometimes it was made. A
Yeah,
lot of
no, they
records.
take that 5th person's check and split it between them. It was hysterical because I did an album for them, and they were funny, man. I mean, there was only 4 of them because I said, "Well, where's the other guy?" You know, no, he's not real. We just created him so we get an extra check. And
That's so funny.
there was so much stuff going on, you know. I mean, it was just really, it was a great time as I look back on it, you know. And again, over the last year and a half or so, when I actually took 51 years worth of work and put it all into one place under one roof, I inventoried. It took me 8 months to inventory everything and catalog it. And it's so funny because there was a friend here who was a big Aerosmith Toys in the Attic fan and a big Black Sabbath fan. And he's a video guy. And he had me take out the original art. He sat between the 2 Black Sabbath pieces holding the Aerosmith cover. And, you know, he just really, they're amazed at the actual art, but they're even more intrigued by the stories. And I'm very lucky to still be able to put 2 thoughts together and remember all this. But I, like most people, just have a memory to fall back on. I have actual visual stakes in the ground. And I said to this guy, when he came over, I said, "Here's all these pieces." There was a whole bunch of stuff out, printed pieces. I said, "Pick any piece and I can tell you the story behind it."
Wow.
And he did. We 2 or 3 a little obscure. And I told him, sometimes the littlest piece has the biggest, most intriguing story, you know, and it's easy for me to remember because I see it and I remember who said what and who did what and how this came down and what was going on. It's like having a visual landmark.
You seem to take it all in stride, and you're not like the guy who's desperate to get the job and all this. You're the right guy for the job, and you're like part of the team always with every step of the way with all these people. You're like another member of the band to these people. So that's invaluable, really.
Well, you know, I used to in my head draw the parallel between a rock band and Pacific Ioneer. They were very much alike. We were playing in our garage rehearsing, and then all of a sudden we got a chance to do something where people started noticing, and then we had a hit single, and then we had another hit single, and there was never a fear of, well, what if we get it? We got to come up with something better. It was always just making it better. And because I surrounded myself with guys that were better than me, I couldn't come in with anything less, because if I did, they'd bust me. And so I needed to come. And so it pushed me to be better than I ever thought I could be.
That's great.
And that was one of the luckiest things I ever did. It was just so happened that Drew Struzan, Bill Garland, Joe Garnett, Ingrid Hinke, Carl Ramsey, those people were just getting started. And Pacific Ioneer was like a learning place. Joe Garnett called it Mecca. He said, this is where the one place where all artists will come because of what we do, you know. And I never really thought about it a lot until later. And then you realize that, hey man, there's some pretty heavy. You ask Drew Struzan, where did he learn his chops? He'll tell you. Pacific Ioneer and ERNIE CEFALU. And, you know, he taught me how to take criticism. He taught me how to be an illustrator instead of a painter. You know, he exposed me to all these things. And had he not done that, he'd have never gone on to do the movie posters.
Yeah.
There's a documentary called The Man Behind the Poster. It's on YouTube. It's on iTunes, not iTunes, Netflix. It's on Netflix, and I do a couple cameos in there. And you know, he became an incredible illustrator. You know, he was incredible when I first saw him, and we did some great work together. And again, just lucky enough to be at the right spot at the right time and having the right crew of people. And I've never done anything with just me. I was always influenced by other people, my wife, the environment, whatever. Being creative and creating something great is never, or just creating something is never a single process. You're affected by everything around you, whether you'd want to admit it or not. And, you know, I've been lucky to come to some of those awarenesses, and it's just alleviated any kind of fear. I used to take weeks to do an idea and come up with something, or days at a minimum. Now it's like 5 minutes.
Well,
It
now you
happens just like that.
also your mind was open. You weren't an uptight guy. Like you've brought these comparisons of the corporate world where these people are really square or however you want to put it, uptight. You had an open mind and you were ready to create. You're ready to create.
And they liked it. They liked the fact, you know, that I could do that.
They can't think that way. They can't think the way that you do.
Most agencies will sell you what they know you'll buy.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't push it. They'll
Right.
sell you what they know you'll buy. And because that's where the money is. They don't want to do experimentation or come to them with some kind of crazy idea that they may say no to. I'm never afraid to do that. You know, I've never been afraid to do that. And it doesn't work every time, but more times than not that it does, so that you can really, and once you get a few, then people start coming to you. You know, I don't have to go look for work anymore. The work comes to me now. And I can sit there and decide whether I want to do it or not. And I just got approached by the guys that bought the record plant in Sausalito. And they bought it, they bought the facility, they got the inventory or the catalog, but they didn't get the name. So they wanted me to, because of my background and all that, they approached me and wanted me to do the logo for them. And I told them the same thing that I told the Granddaddy Perp guys. You got any kids? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, one guy who thought that he was a marketing guy, because one of the things that was really cool about working in those corporate jobs was I learned how what I did mattered and why I needed to do it. I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't realize I was building a brand. I just did some lettering and it became a logo for the Bee Gees or a logo for Alice Cooper or the Rolling Stones side. Or Jesus Christ Superstar. A lot of those. There's a lot of them. And I never really realized why. I just did it. And working with those big companies and marketing people, it taught me the importance of focusing and making sure that what I did conveyed the right message. And learning all that, then I was able to turn around to smaller companies and apply that, where I could do a SWOT analysis, or I could do a brand equity framework, and I knew how to do it to get to the root of what we needed to do, you know, and so it's like having all that experience. You're right, Tony. I mean, having all that enables me to now, instead of spending 3 days, I spend 15 minutes. And it's there.
Well, you don't have to research it. You can execute it. You don't have to overthink it. You can do it.
Yeah. And that's how it happens now. It's just like that. It just comes to me and it's done.
That's
amazing.
awesome. That's
amazing.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
No,
yeah, it really means a lot.
And
so
Steve, next time don't talk so much, okay?
Well, all good things must come to an end. We want to thank everyone for checking out some heavy cannabis culture on The Leaf. A huge thank you to Ernie Cefalu, our co-host Tony Mann. The Leaf is brought to you by the Blush Media Network. Questions or comments, hit us at blushmedianetwork@gmail.com. Thank you for joining.